In 1969, a boy was born in Harlem who would grow up to build a billion-dollar empire, transform the music industry, and become one of the most powerful men in entertainment. Today, that same man sits in a Brooklyn detention center, facing life in prison as victim after victim comes forward with horrifying stories spanning 3 decades. This is the complete story of Sean Combs, from the murder of his father when he was just 3 years old, to the legendary parties at Howard University, to discovering Biggie Smalls and building Bad Boy Records into a hip-hop powerhouse. But behind the fame, the money, and the carefully crafted public image was a dark side that's only now being fully exposed. The surveillance videos of brutal assaults, the secret recordings used for blackmail, the freak-offs with male escorts. The $20 million settlement was paid in just 24 hours. By the end of this video, you'll understand how Diddy maintained his empire of fear for decades and why it all came crashing down in 2024.
Man, it's hard to believe we're even having this conversation. I mean, we're talking about Diddy, the guy who was literally everywhere in music and entertainment for the past 30 years.
Exactly. And what's crazy is how quickly it all fell apart. One minute he's a billionaire mogul with a perfect public image, and the next he's sitting in a cell without bail, watching his empire crumble in real time.
Let's break down how we got here. From the very beginning to where we are now with this federal trial that could send him away for life.
So Sean John Combs was born in Harlem, New York on the 4th of November, 1969. His father, Melvin Earl Combs, was actually connected to the drug trade in Harlem.
Yeah, and this is something most people don't know. Melvin Combs had ties to Frank Lucas, who was this infamous drug kingpin in Harlem during the 60s and 70s.
Frank Lucas was the guy portrayed by Denzel Washington in American Gangster, right?
Exactly. Lucas ran this massive heroin operation called Blue Magic and allegedly made over $50 million before getting busted. Diddy's dad was connected to that world.
And that connection ended tragically. In 1972, when Diddy was just 3 years old, his father was murdered during a drug deal gone wrong. Apparently, someone thought he was an informant.
That's right. After that, Diddy was raised primarily by his mother, Janice. She worked multiple jobs as a model and teacher's assistant, trying to provide for Diddy and his sister Kesha.
And when Diddy was about 12, Janice moved the family to Mount Vernon, a suburb of New York, specifically to keep Diddy away from the streets so he wouldn't end up like his father.
But even though they left Harlem, they were still struggling financially. Janice was working 2 or 3 jobs, but they were pretty poor.
What's interesting is that despite the financial struggles, Diddy got a solid education. He went to Mount St. Michael Academy, which was a Catholic school in the Bronx, and he actually played football there. His team even won a division title in 1986.
And after high school, he went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. to study business. That's where he really started showing his entrepreneurial side.
Right, he was already hustling in college, but legally. He started a shuttle service to the airport and became known for throwing these massive parties that would attract up to 1,000 people.
Those parties were legendary. That's where he started building his network and reputation. But he never finished college. He dropped out after his sophomore year because he got an internship at Uptown Records in New York.
So Diddy lands this internship at Uptown Records in 1990. How did that happen?
He grew up near Heavy D in Mount Vernon, so he already had that connection. Heavy D introduced him to Andre Harrell, who founded Uptown Records, and that's how Diddy got his foot in the door.
And Diddy was hustling hard, right? He would take the train to New York City for his internship while still in school. And apparently, he was so broke that he would hide in the bathroom when the conductor came through because he couldn't afford the ticket.
Yeah, he was grinding. Eventually, he realized he couldn't keep up with classes and the internship, so he dropped out of Howard and went to work at Uptown full-time.
And Andre Harrell saw something in him, right?
Absolutely. Harrell started teaching Diddy the music business, and Diddy worked his way up quickly. He became a talent director and started working with major acts like Mary J. Blige and Joe Desi. He was a big part of developing their careers.
But then there was that tragedy at City College in 1991 that almost derailed everything.
Right. This was a huge moment in Diddy's early career. He and Heavy D hosted this celebrity basketball game at City College of New York. They had big names like Run DMC, Big Daddy Kane, and Boyz II Men playing.
The problem was the venue could only handle about 2,700 people, but over 5,000 showed up. There were only 1,200 tickets being sold at the door. and there was just one entrance for everyone.
The crowd got angry because the check-in process was so slow. There were some small fights, and by the time the game started, the situation was already dangerous.
Then the organizers started shutting the doors, which caused people outside to rush to get in. The gym was in the basement down a set of stairs, so as people tried to rush in, it caused a stampede.
People were pushing each other down the stairs and through glass windows. The organizers shut the doors inside the gym to keep people from getting in, but that caused the people right outside the door to get slammed against the wall or trampled.
This went on for about 15 minutes while the game was still happening. When they finally opened the doors, some people had already been crushed to death.
Someone announced over the intercom that the game was canceled because 3 people had died, which caused another stampede of fans trying to get out. By the end, 9 people were killed and 29 others were injured.
Diddy was still fairly unknown at the time, but this made national headlines. He claimed he tried to hire the NYPD for security and said he personally tried giving victims CPR.
But a report from the mayor's office found Diddy responsible. They said he hired inexperienced staff and overpromoted the event, which is why so many people showed up without tickets.
No criminal charges were filed, but Diddy had to settle out of court with many of the victims, and this put his career at Uptown Records in jeopardy.
Right. The other executives at Uptown were pressuring Andre Harrell to fire Diddy. They thought he was too full of himself and bringing drama to the label.
But Diddy managed to bounce back. In 1992, he produced Mary J. Blige's album, What's the 411, which was a major success.
And that same year, he discovered a rapper from Brooklyn named Christopher Wallace, better known as Biggie Smalls or the Notorious Big.
So how did Diddy discover Biggie? That's a pretty legendary story in hip-hop.
Diddy found Biggie after reading about him in the unsigned hype section of the Source magazine. He arranged a meeting and they met at a restaurant in Harlem called Sylvia's.
Sylvia's is known for having some of the best soul food in the world. But when Diddy asked Biggie what he wanted to eat, Biggie said he wasn't hungry.
Diddy realized Biggie knew what a big moment this was and was so excited about the opportunity that he wasn't even hungry. Diddy could tell how badly Biggie wanted to be a star, and he knew right away he needed to sign him.
But there was a problem, right? Diddy's career at Uptown Records was still on shaky ground.
Exactly. Even though Diddy knew how to make hit records, he had made a lot of enemies at Uptown. The other executives hated him and were pressuring Andre Harrell to let him go.
Diddy wouldn't listen to anyone except Andre, but Andre was starting to branch out into movies and television and didn't have time to manage Diddy's conflicts with everyone else.
The final straw came when Diddy brought Biggie to the label and started working on his first album, Ready to Die. Executives at MCA Records, which was partnered with Uptown, didn't like Biggie's music because they thought it was too violent and street-oriented.
MCA didn't want to release the album, but Andre knew Diddy wasn't going to be happy about that. Andre saw Diddy's vision and knew that music was changing. Dr. Dre's album The Chronic had just dropped, and gangsta rap was taking over.
Andre didn't want to tell Diddy and Biggie how to make music, but he also didn't have time to convince everyone else at the label. So Andre made the tough decision to fire Diddy from Uptown so he could figure it out on his own.
That must have been devastating for Diddy at the time.
It was. He spent a few days crying and trying to figure out his next move. But just a few weeks later, Diddy got a $10 million deal with Arista Records to start his own label, Bad Boy Records.
And Biggie Smalls was the first artist signed to Bad Boy, right?
Yep, and Diddy immediately got to work, finding more artists to bring to the label. The next rapper he signed was Craig Mack.
Craig Mack's single Flava in Ya Ear was the first single that Bad Boy dropped, and it was a big hit, peaking at number 9 on the Billboard chart.
Then Biggie hopped on the remix with LL Cool J, Rampage, and Busta Rhymes, which built more hype for Craig Mack and Bad Boy.
That same year, Biggie had a major hit with Juicy, the lead single from his album. The song made it to number 27 on the Billboard chart and is now considered one of the greatest rap songs of all time.
Biggie followed up by dropping Ready to Die in September 1994, which was a massive hit and peaked at number 15 on the Billboard chart. People were already calling it an instant classic, and it made Biggie an overnight superstar.
Craig Mack also dropped his album, Project Funked a World. It did decent numbers, but it didn't quite live up to the hype around Ready to Die. And from there, Craig Mack's career started to go downhill.
Yeah, Craig Mack's story is actually pretty sad. He ended up leaving Bad Boy in 1996 and dropped a second project on a different label in 97, but by that point, he had lost a lot of his buzz.
He pretty much disappeared from the music industry for 20 years after that. Then around 2012, he appeared in a YouTube video telling fans he had joined a Christian ministry in South Carolina, which some people say was actually a cult.
Craig Mack self-released one final album in 2017, but a few months later, in March 2018, he died from heart failure and complications from HIV.
Like a lot of artists who signed to Bad Boy, Craig Mack had a pretty tragic life after he left the label. Some fans even accused Diddy of wrecking Craig Mack's career on purpose once he realized that he didn't have as much potential as other artists on the label.
But even though Craig Mack's album didn't sell as much as Biggie's, the success of both projects proved that Bad Boy was on the come-up and that Diddy knew how to build a label.
It started out pretty rocky, and no one knew what was going to happen after Diddy was fired from Uptown. But in under a year, the label had already dropped multiple hit singles and released a classic album.
Over the next few years, Bad Boy became the top label for upcoming rap and R&B artists, and Diddy started signing new talent like Faith Evans, 112, and Total.
As Diddy became more successful, it seems like his ego also started to grow, and there were more allegations about his violence and abuse of women.
Yeah, Diddy's former business partner Kirk Burrows claims he saw Diddy attack a woman inside the Bad Boy offices in '94.
And an ex-employee told Rolling Stone that they had to pull Diddy off a victim after they heard screams and the sound of shattering glass.
A former intern at Arista, named April Lampros, claimed in a lawsuit that in the mid-90s, Diddy attacked her multiple times, including once forcing her to give him oral sex in a parking garage.
She also said that Diddy allegedly forced her to take ecstasy and have sex with him and his then-girlfriend, Kim Porter.
At the time, Diddy was one of the hottest music producers in the world and used his influence in the industry to keep the news from getting out.
At the same time, Bad Boy Records was about to get a lot more publicity after they started beefing with Tupac and Death Row Records.
This is where things get really interesting. At first, there was no beef between Biggie and Tupac. They were actually cool with each other.
Biggie was a huge fan of Tupac when he was first coming up, and Tupac was bumping Biggie's first single, Party and Bullshit, for weeks after he first heard it.
Before Ready to Die dropped and Biggie really blew up, Diddy had flown him out to LA to do promo for the album. Biggie bought some weed from a dealer who knew Tupac and convinced the guy to connect them.
When Biggie and Tupac first met, they hit it off right away and became friends. When Tupac was in New York, he would hang out with Biggie and his crew, Junior Mafia, and Pac even brought them out on stage at a few of his shows.
At one point, Biggie even wanted Tupac to be his manager because Diddy was still trying to get Bad Boy off the ground and didn't have much money to give him. Tupac was already a big name, and Biggie was still in the streets and wanted to make it in the rap game like Pac did.
But Tupac convinced Biggie that Diddy would make him rich. Biggie and Pac were tight back then.
That all changed after Tupac was set up and robbed at a studio in New York.
Tupac was going through some legal problems after he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman named Diana Jackson. It was a huge case, and Tupac had some serious legal bills, so he was trying to work as much as possible to pay his lawyers.
The night before the final day of the trial, Tupac was working on some verses for a rapper named Little Sean when he got a message from a guy named Jimmy Henchman.
Jimmy Henchman was a drug kingpin from Brooklyn who started a management company called Czar Entertainment. He had ties to another big-time drug dealer named Haitian Jack, who was one of Tupac's co-defendants in the sexual assault case.
Jimmy Henchman wanted Tupac to go to Quad Studios in Times Square to do a feature for his artist, Little Sean. Tupac was suspicious, but Jimmy Henchman was offering $7,000, and Tupac needed the money, so he agreed.
Tupac went to the studio with his friend Stretch and a few other people. Right as they were walking into the building, they heard someone yelling to them from a few stories up.
They realized it was Lil Cease and some other guys from Junior Mafia, which meant Biggie and Diddy were also in the building. But Tupac never even made it to the studio because he was stopped in the lobby by 3 armed robbers.
They demanded Tupac give up his jewelry. Tupac wasn't about to give it up, so they beat him up and shot him 5 times.
Tupac was rushed to the hospital and had emergency surgery. He checked himself out a few hours later against the doctor's orders and showed up to the hearing of his trial bandaged up and in a wheelchair.
Tupac was found not guilty of the most serious charges, but was found guilty of 2 counts of sexual abuse and sentenced to 18 months to 4 years in prison. His lawyer filed an appeal, but his bail was set at $3 million.
Tupac couldn't afford it, which meant he had to stay locked up while they worked on the case.
Tupac knew what happened at Quad Studios wasn't just a random robbery. It was a setup. He blamed Jimmy Henchman, but Tupac was also convinced that Biggie and Diddy were in on it because they were there that night.
But what really made Pac think Biggie was involved was when Biggie dropped the track "Who Shot Ya" shortly after the incident. Tupac interpreted the lyrics as Biggie mocking him about the shooting.
Biggie and Diddy both denied having anything to do with Tupac getting shot, but Pac didn't believe them.
While Tupac was serving his sentence, Suge Knight was on the lookout for new talent to sign to Death Row Records. Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg had put Death Row on the map with The Chronic and Doggy Style, but none of the other artists on the label were blowing up and becoming superstars.
Suge knew he needed another big name and thought Tupac would be perfect. Tupac heard that Suge Knight was interested in signing him, so he reached out to ask for help.
Tupac still couldn't afford bail, and his mom's house was about to go into foreclosure, so Tupac asked his new wife, Keisha Morris, to get in contact with Suge Knight about a deal.
They ended up getting on the phone, and later the same day, Suge sent Tupac $15,000 to save his mom's home. Then, Suge flew to Clinton Correctional Facility, where Tupac was locked up, and offered him a 3-album deal with Death Row, which would give him the money he needed to get out of prison.
So Tupac had no choice but to accept the deal with Suge. During the meeting, Tupac told Suge all about the shooting at Quad Studios, and his theory that he was set up by Biggie and Diddy.
Tupac told Suge that if he signed to Death Row, Suge had to have his back and go after Diddy for him, because Pac wanted to destroy Bad Boy Records.
The same day, Suge left the prison and flew down to New York City to go to the 1995 Source Awards at Madison Square Garden. Death Row won the award for Soundtrack of the Year for the movie Above the Rim.
Suge went on stage to accept the award and made a speech that basically started the East Coast-West Coast beef. In his speech, Suge made fun of Diddy for ad-libbing on tracks and dancing in music videos.
Suge invited any artists who didn't want their producer all up in their videos to come sign with Death Row. Even though he didn't mention Diddy by name, it was pretty clear who he was talking about, and that's what sparked the beef between Bad Boy Records and Death Row.
It didn't take long for things to get violent. A few weeks later, Diddy and Suge were both in Atlanta for Jermaine Dupri's birthday party. The crews ended up getting into a fight outside, and shots were fired.
Jake Robles, a member of the mob Piru Bloods and Death Row employee who worked as Suge's bodyguard, ended up getting killed. No one knows exactly who pulled the trigger, but multiple witnesses, including Jermaine Dupri, said it was Diddy's bodyguard.
Suge immediately blamed Diddy, which made the beef even more personal.
In 2003, Diddy's former business partner Kirk Burrows claimed that Diddy had approved the murder of Jake Robles, and that a local sheriff who later died in a car accident identified Diddy's bodyguard Anthony Wolf Jones as the shooter.
Although another one of Diddy's former bodyguards, Gene Deal, claims this was all cap and that the murder had nothing to do with Diddy.
Gene said in an interview that the same night, Suge had also slapped Jermaine Dupri, who was upstairs hiding when Jake was shot. Gene also said that the real killer was a dude named Jason who was mad that Suge and Jake were talking crazy to his girl.
According to Gene, everyone depended on Wolf to try and hype up the East Coast-West Coast beef, although Gene also admitted he wasn't around at the time, and that's just what he heard.
No one really knows who killed Jake Robles, but Suge blamed it on Diddy, and it made the beef even worse.
Not long after Suge's homie got killed, Tupac signed his deal with Death Row and finally posted bail. Once Tupac got out, he started working on his next album, while the East Coast-West Coast beef was heating up.
Diddy kept growing Bad Boy Records, and in 1996, he signed Mace and the Lox to the label. Mace had already built a buzz in Harlem after forming a group called Children of the Corn with his childhood friend Cam'ron and a bunch of other Harlem rappers, including Big L.
After Children of the Corn broke up, Mace decided to go solo. His sister introduced him to a guy named Cutta Love, who was Biggie's road manager. Cutta Love took Mace to a rap convention in Atlanta to meet Diddy.
At the convention, Mace did a freestyle, and Diddy was so impressed that he offered him $250,000 to sign with Bad Boy.
Around the same time, Diddy discovered the Lox after hearing one of their demo tapes. The Lox was a group from Yonkers made up of Jadakiss, Styles P, and Chic Louch.
The Lox had done a record with Jay-Z, a rapper and producer known for mentoring Jay-Z. It was an underground hit in New York, and Mary J. Blige heard it and became a big fan of the Lox. She passed their tape along to Diddy, who offered them a deal with Bad Boy.
Mace and the Lox joined Bad Boy right at the time when the East Coast-West Coast beef was getting serious.
A few months after Tupac got out of jail, he dropped a legendary diss track, Hit 'Em Up, where he responded to Who Shot Ya by dissing Biggie and the rest of Bad Boy.
On the song, Tupac rapped, "First off, F, your B. And the clique you claim, West Side when we ride, come equipped with game. You claim to be a player, but IF, Ed your wife."
Tupac claimed that he had sex with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. Faith was a singer signed to Bad Boy Records, and Pac said he paid her to go out to California to record a verse for his album.
Faith didn't know that Pac was signed to Death Row at the time, but when she asked Biggie if he was okay with it, he told her to go get the money. So Faith flew out to LA to record, which is when Tupac claims they hooked up.
Faith denies that she actually slept with Tupac, although she admits that he tried to get her to give him oral sex in his hotel room while giving her money for the feature. After that, Faith realized that Tupac was only using her to get back at Biggie.
There's another wild theory going around that Tupac also slept with Diddy's girlfriend Kim Porter, and that Diddy was in on it.
In 2024, a guy named Chris Todd published a book called Kim's Lost Words, A Journey for Justice from the Other Side on Amazon, which was supposed to be a bunch of diary entries Kim had written before she died and saved on a flash drive.
The book had all kinds of wild stories about Diddy, and people started buying it like crazy. In one of the chapters, Kim allegedly claimed that she and Diddy were in an open relationship, and she hooked up with Tupac.
When Diddy found out about it, he supposedly suggested that they all have a threesome, but Tupac shut it down because he wasn't gay. Diddy kept trying to make it happen, which made Tupac really uncomfortable, and from then on, they hated each other.
So, when Tupac bragged about smashing his girl on Hit 'Em Up, Diddy was furious, which may have been part of the reason he wanted Tupac killed.
It's only a theory, and Kim's family has said that the book is fake, but based on all the other stories about Diddy, it doesn't sound that hard to believe.
On the outro of Hit 'Em Up, Tupac made it clear he wanted smoke with anyone affiliated with Bad Boy, saying F. Mobb Deep, F. Biggie, F. Bad Boy, as a staff, record label, and as a mother, ING crew, and if you want to be down with Bad Boy, then F. You too.
Hit 'Em Up was one of the most savage diss tracks ever, and it might have been the reason Tupac was killed only 3 months later.
On the 7th of September, 1996, Tupac and Suge Knight were leaving the MGM Grand in Las Vegas when a car pulled up next to them at a stoplight and started letting off shots. They were both hit, but Suge survived, while Tupac was pronounced dead at the hospital a few days later.
To this day, no one knows exactly what happened, but one of the main theories was that it was connected to the East Coast-West Coast beef.
In 2023, police arrested a guy named Keith D., who claims he was in the car with Tupac's killer the night of the murder.
For years, Keith D had been claiming in interviews that Diddy offered him $1 million to kill Tupac or Suge Knight. Keith D was a member of the Compton Crips and the uncle of Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, the main suspect in Tupac's murder.
Baby Lane was also a Crip who had beef with a few Bloods who were connected to Death Row. Right before Tupac was murdered, Baby Lane had been jumped by Suge Knight, Tupac, and a few other Death Row affiliates when they spotted him in the lobby of the MGM Grand Hotel after the Mike Tyson fight.
According to Keith D, Diddy had already offered the Compton Crips $1 million to kill Suge Knight and Tupac, so after the fight at the MGM Grand, they decided to go through with it and followed Suge and Tupac until they had a clear shot.
In a recorded interview with a former LAPD officer, Keith D said it was Baby Lane who fired the shots that killed Tupac.
Keith D had been on record claiming that Diddy was the one who put out the hit since at least 2008, but for years, the case was unsolved. It wasn't until all the other accusations about Diddy started to come out that Keith D was finally arrested and charged with Tupac's murder.
But by that point, Baby Lane had already been dead for years after he was killed in an unrelated gang shooting in 1998.
Tupac's death was the beginning of the end for Death Row Records. Suge was arrested for a probation violation for jumping Baby Lane the night of the murder and got sentenced to 9 years in prison.
But that still wasn't the end of the East Coast-West Coast beef. On the 9th of March, 1997, Biggie was murdered while leaving a party in the Hollywood Hills.
Biggie was in a black SUV with Lil Cease and other members of Junior Mafia, and Diddy was in the car behind him. While they were stopped at a red light, a Chevy Impala pulled up at the stoplight next to the car Biggie was in.
The driver rolled down the window and started letting off shots from a 9mm pistol. Biggie was hit 4 times and ended up dying at the hospital.
Biggie's murder is also still unsolved, but most people thought it was part of the East Coast-West Coast beef and payback for Tupac's death.
Greg Kading, the same LAPD officer who interviewed Keefe D about his involvement in Tupac's murder, claimed that Biggie was killed by Wardell Poochie Faust, a Mob Piru member with ties to Suge Knight.
Although there's another theory that Diddy may have also been behind Biggie's murder. Multiple people told Rolling Stone that right before his death, Biggie was trying to leave Bad Boy Records.
At the time of his murder, Biggie was in a legal battle with the label over the rights to his music. According to one music executive, when Biggie tried to take back the rights to his publishing, Diddy told the lawyers, "I would never give it up until I'm dead and my bones are crushing to powder."
So one theory is that Diddy decided to take out Biggie before he could leave Bad Boy and staged it to look like it was payback for Tupac. There's no evidence that Diddy was involved, but after everything else that's come out about him, anything is possible.
Biggie's second album, Life After Death, came out 16 days after he died. It was a huge hit and debuted at #1 on Billboard after selling close to 700,000 copies the first week.
It was full of features from other Bad Boy artists like Mase, The Lox, and even Diddy himself. A few months earlier, Diddy had made his debut as a rapper under the name Puff Daddy.
He dropped a single called Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, which spent 28 weeks on the Billboard chart. Later that same year, Diddy dropped his debut album No Way Out, which had multiple features from Biggie and other Bad Boy artists like Mase, The Lox, 112, and Faith Evans.
No Way Out was another big hit for Bad Boy and spent a few weeks at the top of the Billboard charts. It even won a Grammy that year for Best Rap Album.
With Biggie gone, Diddy continued to promote the other artists on the label. Mase dropped his debut album Harlem World in October '97, which also did big numbers and eventually went quadruple platinum after selling close to 5 million copies.
In '98, The Lox dropped their album Money, Power, Respect, which peaked at #3 on the Billboard chart, and is now considered a classic hip-hop album.
Around the same time, Diddy also started hosting his famous all-white parties in the Hamptons. From music industry execs to celebrities and sports team owners, anyone who was rich and famous would end up going to Diddy's parties.
But there were also a lot of sketchy things going on at those parties, and that's where a lot of Diddy's alleged crimes happened.
Bad Boy was one of the most successful hip-hop labels of all time, but by the late '90s, things started to fall apart. Even though Diddy made them all stars, no one liked working with him, and all of his artists started to leave the label.
The Lox left Bad Boy in 1999 and signed to DMX's Rough Riders Entertainment. By that time, Bad Boy was known for having a more pop-oriented R&B style, which they felt didn't match their hardcore sound.
The Lox felt like Rough Riders would be a better fit, but Diddy wouldn't let them out of their contract. It wasn't until they got in a heated argument and Styles P threw a chair at Diddy that he finally let them go.
Mase left Bad Boy the same year after dropping his second album, Double Up. In an interview with Funk Flex a few months before the project dropped, Mase shocked the world by announcing he was leaving the music industry to follow God and become a minister.
Mase said that the rap industry wasn't real, and he wanted to do something that made him happy. He also later admitted that a big part of his decision to leave the music industry was to escape Diddy.
Mase claims that he wrote a lot of the hits that Bad Boy was putting out at the time, including Biggie's classic record, Mo Money Mo Problems. He'd be in the studio working on music while Diddy was out partying, but wasn't getting any money or credit for the work.
Mase said in an interview, Puff would go out and party, and I would be in the studio writing the records, and then he'd just come back and say, this is his part, or that is his part. But I was the person there creating it all. And even Mo Money, Mo Problems, I came up with that. I came up with the beat too.
Mase continued, so just imagine all of these moments that are taken from you. The records, the beats, you ain't getting the money, you ain't getting the publishing, you ain't getting the respect, and I don't think you're like that.
So eventually, Mase got fed up and decided to do something else with his life. Ever since then, he's had problems with Diddy, who refused to give him back the rights to his music, and they've taken shots at each other over the years.
It wasn't just artists on Bad Boy that Diddy had problems with. He was also hit with 2 felonies after he attacked another music industry executive, Steve Stout.
Steve Stout was working with Nas at the time, who had just done a song with Diddy called Hate Me Now. In the music video, there was a scene showing Nas and Diddy getting crucified.
Originally, Diddy wanted to be in the scene, and Sony Records spent an extra $14,000 to make it happen. But after it was finished, Diddy started having second thoughts.
Diddy's scene showed him nailed to a cross wearing a crown of thorns like Jesus. Diddy was a Catholic, so he thought it might be a bad look.
Sony didn't want to cut the scene because they had already spent the money, so they agreed to include a disclaimer, which Diddy approved. But right before the video was ready to air on MTV, Diddy spoke with his mom and his pastor, who convinced him that they had to edit out the scene.
Diddy's pastor called Steve Stout and asked him to edit the scene. According to the pastor, Steve Stout said he would make it happen. But by that point, the video had already been sent to MTV, and Steve didn't have the authority to stop it.
The video ended up airing on MTV later that day with the crucifixion scene still in it. Diddy was mad and started calling Steve Stout nonstop.
Diddy was convinced that Steve Stout and the label did it on purpose to create a controversy. But Steve Stout claims they were waiting to hear back from Diddy about what to do, but didn't get an answer in time to pull the video.
However, it happened. Diddy blamed Steve Stout. A few minutes later, Diddy barged into Steve Stout's office at Universal and punched him in the face.
Then Diddy and a few of his bodyguards threw Steve on the ground and beat him with a phone, a chair, and even a champagne bottle while Steve was lying on the floor bleeding. Diddy and his crew started trashing the office.
Steve had to be taken to the hospital and decided to press charges against Diddy for attacking him. At first, Diddy denied it and claimed they had gotten to a fistfight, but police had enough evidence to make an arrest.
Diddy was charged with second-degree assault and criminal mischief. Diddy eventually made a public apology and settled a lawsuit with Steve Stout out of court for $500,000.
After that, Steve agreed to drop the assault charge, and Diddy pled guilty to harassment, which meant he was only sentenced to 1 day of anger management classes.
Diddy skated on the case, but his legal problems were just getting started. After Mace and the Lox left, Diddy struggled to break new talent, especially after his newest up-and-coming artist, Shine, was arrested in connection with a wild shooting at a club in New York and spent the next 9 years locked up.
Despite all these setbacks, Diddy was still building his business empire. In 1998, he launched the Sean John clothing line, which became a huge success.
Sean John was nominated for the Council of Fashion Designers of America Award for Menswear Designer of the Year in 2000 and won in 2004.
California billionaire Ronald Burkle invested $100 million into the company in 2003, which helped it expand even further.
In 2007, Diddy agreed to help develop the Ciroc vodka brand for a 50% share of the profits. This partnership was incredibly lucrative and helped cement Diddy's status as a business mogul beyond just music.
He also acquired the Ennis clothing line from Liz Claiborne for $20 million in 2008 and launched Revolt Television, a television network with a film production branch, in 2014.
By 2022, Forbes estimated Diddy's net worth at around $1 billion, making him one of the wealthiest musical artists in the world.
But behind all this success, the allegations of violence, abuse, and exploitation continued to pile up.
Let's talk about Cassie Ventura, who's become a central figure in the case against Diddy. She signed to Bad Boy Records in 2006 when she was just 19 years old, and Diddy was 37.
According to Don Richard, who was part of Danity Kane and later Diddy Dirty Money with Cassie, Diddy was obsessed with Cassie from the first time they met in 2005.
Dawn claims she was there when Diddy first met Cassie. According to Dawn, Diddy was obsessed with Cassie and kept her away from everyone else in the room.
Cassie signed a 10-album deal with Bad Boy in 2006, and about a year later, there were rumors that Diddy and she were dating. They were spotted attending public events together but kept the relationship quiet because of the age gap.
Diddy had just broken up with his longtime girlfriend, Kim Porter, who he met while working at Uptown Records. According to a lawsuit Cassie later filed, Diddy started aggressively pursuing her after he ended things with Kim.
Cassie signed a 10-album deal with Bad Boy in 2006, and about a year later, there were rumors that Diddy and she were dating. They were spotted attending public events together but kept the relationship quiet because of the age gap.
They dated for over 10 years, and during their relationship, Cassie claims that Diddy was abusing her the whole time. She claims that Diddy forced her to buy and take drugs like cocaine, ecstasy, and ketamine and be part of his infamous freak-offs, the wild sex parties he would host at his properties.
During the freak-offs, Diddy would allegedly force Cassie to have sex with male escorts and film it. Sometimes he would join in, and other times he would just watch and pleasure himself.
Outside of the freak-offs, he was also insanely jealous and would beat Cassie just for talking to other men, even when other people were around.
In her lawsuit, Dawn Richards admitted that she witnessed Diddy assault Cassie multiple times. During a label dinner in 2010 that was attended by big names like Nayo and Jimmy Iovine, Dawn claims she saw Diddy punch Cassie in the stomach so hard that she doubled over and fell on the ground in pain.
According to Dawn, Cassie was let out of the room, and the dinner continued on. Dawn tried to talk with Cassie later that night and encouraged her to leave Diddy. But when Diddy heard her, he was furious and threatened to kill them both.
Even if Cassie wanted to leave, she didn't have much of a choice. Every part of her life was being controlled by Diddy or one of his management companies. He paid for her apartment and all her living expenses. He even had access to her medical records.
When Cassie started to experience memory loss and other symptoms from the drug use and constant beatings, the doctors would send the results to Diddy instead of her. His staff also knew to take Cassie to certain doctors so he could control her.
Cassie wasn't the only victim of Diddy's abuse. A dancer named Adria English claims that from 2006 to 2009, she was groomed and sex trafficked by Diddy and his employee Theum Thomas.
Adria claimed she was hired as a dancer at Diddy's white parties in the Hamptons in Miami. At her first party, Diddy told her and other dancers to drink from bottles that were laced with ecstasy.
Adria said she wasn't forced to do anything sexual at the first party, but over time she was forced into prostitution. Adria claims Diddy and his accomplices forced her to have sex with guests and used to make her wear a black dress while everyone else dressed in white to mark her as a sex worker.
Adria later sued Diddy and a guy named Jacob Araboff, Alaska, a Jacob the jeweler, claiming he was one of her frequent partners and knew she was being trafficked.
When Danity Kane broke up in 2009, Dawn Richards joined Diddy and R&B singer Kalena Harper to form the group Diddy Dirty Money. According to Dawn, during her time with the new group, Diddy's abuse only got worse.
She claims he would often barge into her dressing room and feel her up or order her to strip down to her underwear during rehearsal. If she pushed back, Diddy would threaten to kick her out of the group and end her music career.
During a rehearsal for her performance on Saturday Night Live, Diddy screamed at Dawn so loud that the staff in the lobby started getting worried. Dawn told him to stop calling them bitches, and Diddy cocked back his fist like he was about to punch her before he was restrained by a bodyguard.
Dawn ran out crying and called her dad, who came to New York and threatened to call the police on Diddy. But Diddy just told Dawn's dad to think about his family and his daughter's career.
After the SNL performance, Diddy warned Dawn not to call her dad unless she was in the hospital.
The turning point in all of this came in May 2024, when CNN released a video from March 2016 that shows Diddy attacking Cassie in the hallway of a hotel.
The video shows Diddy wearing nothing but a towel, chasing Cassie down the hall at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, then hitting and kicking her while she was laying on the ground.
It also shows him dragging her by the shirt down the hallway and throwing a vase at her. The video footage perfectly matched an accusation Cassie had made against Diddy in her lawsuit.
On that day, she claimed that Diddy was extremely drunk and punched her in the face, giving her a black eye. When she tried to leave, Diddy chased her into the hallway and attacked her.
Diddy knew that if the footage ever got out, it could ruin his career. So according to Cassie, he paid the hotel $50,000 to give him the footage and make sure it never got out.
Someone must have kept a copy because it ended up coming out anyway, but not in time to stop Diddy from continuing the abuse.
Cassie and Diddy finally broke up for good while Diddy was distracted by the death of his ex, Kim Porter. Diddy and Kim dated for 13 years and had 3 kids together.
In 2018, Kim randomly died of pneumonia at age 47. It was pretty unexpected, and a lot of people questioned exactly what happened and whether Diddy was involved.
Even though Kim never directly accused Diddy of abuse, people who knew him said they had a pretty wild relationship. One of Diddy's bodyguards said that he often saw Diddy put hands on Kim.
Another source told Hot 97 that he saw Diddy hit Kim with a bottle during a fight at a club in Atlanta.
Donald Trump Jr. said in an interview with DJ Academics that his ex-wife was good friends with Kim Porter. According to Trump Jr., "My ex-wife actually was a model in New York, and she was really good friends with Kim Porter, who was Diddy's wife, the one who died at 47 from pneumonia."
Trump Jr. continued, "When that happened, she goes, 'Something's up with that.' I go, 'What do you mean?' She's like, 'Oh dude, Kim used to tell me like it was bad. It was a bad situation. I didn't even know that, but they were sort of friendly. They'd do photo shoots together or whatever. They would hang out. She was really afraid of him."
So when Trump Jr. heard Kim died, he immediately thought Diddy had something to do with it.
Kim's Lost Words, the alleged memoir Kim wrote right before she died, also had tons of abuse allegations about Diddy, but there wasn't any evidence to prove it was real. And Kim's family came out and said it was all fake, which forced Amazon to take it down.
Even though the book was probably fake, some people still think that Diddy had something to do with Kim's death, including her ex-husband, Al B. Sure.
According to Al, Kim was working on a memoir before she died. He said that she was trying to do what Cassie eventually did and expose all the terrible things Diddy had done to her and others. But before she could, Kim mysteriously died, which Al called a tragic murder.
Al says he was trying to look into her death for years but was ignored by the police. But now, with all the recent allegations against Diddy, he wants there to be a new investigation.
It's not clear if Kim was actually trying to expose Diddy before she died, but if she was, Cassie got the job done for her.
Cassie was finally able to get away from Diddy while he was busy grieving over Kim. After they broke up, Cassie started seeing her personal trainer, Alex Fine. They ended up getting married in 2019 and had 2 daughters together.
When she was out of her toxic relationship with Diddy, she realized how badly Diddy had abused her, so she decided to expose him.
New York passed a law called the Adult Survivors Act that allowed victims of sexual abuse to file lawsuits even if it was past the statute of limitations. So, in November 2023, Cassie filed a lawsuit against Diddy, accusing him of abuse, violence, and sex trafficking during their 10-year relationship.
Diddy denied the allegations, but a day later, they settled the lawsuit out of court for $20 million. The allegations were pretty shocking, but some people still thought it could have been a cash grab.
But then more accusations and lawsuits against Diddy started rolling in. Diddy was forced to step down as chairman of Revolt, and tons of brands he did business with decided to cut ties.
Plus, it wasn't just women coming forward. Men were also making accusation about Diddy.
In February 2024, a producer named Lil Rod filed his own lawsuit accusing Diddy of sexual abuse. According to Lil Rod, Diddy hired him in 2020 to work on his upcoming project, The Love Album, Off the Grid.
Lil Rod ended up producing 9 songs on the album and developed a close relationship with Diddy during the recording process. He started traveling with Diddy and became his videographer.
But as time went on, Lil Rod claims Diddy became more and more controlling and abusive. Just like Cassie, Lil Rod claims he was drugged and forced into sexual acts against his will. He claims Diddy forced him to hire prostitutes for him and his celebrity friends.
The lawsuit mentions that Diddy had cameras all over his house that he used to record the famous people he hung out with committing crimes and having sex. The footage allegedly shows Diddy giving laced alcoholic drinks to minors and sex workers at his home.
The lawsuit also named several other celebrities who were allegedly involved in Diddy's activities. Lil Rod claims Cuba Gooding Jr. was part of Diddy's inner circle and assaulted him on a yacht.
Cuba allegedly grabbed him by the thigh near his groin and wouldn't back off until Lil Rod pushed him away.
The suit also claims that Diddy bragged about paying Young Miami from the City Girls to be a prostitute. Diddy and Young Miami were seeing each other at the time, so the timeline makes sense.
They were first linked in 2021 but didn't officially confirm their relationship until 2022 when Diddy appeared on Young Miami's podcast, Carisha Please. Although she claims they were never officially in a relationship, even though they sometimes dated, they officially split in 2023 before all the recent allegations.
On an episode of her podcast, Young Miami addressed the rumors and denied all the allegations about being a sex worker and participating in Diddy's freak-offs. Young Miami also claims that Diddy was never abusive to her, but she admits she can't speak on any of his exes because she wasn't around at that time.
There was also a page in the lawsuit that claims Diddy had sex with a rapper, an R&B singer, and the producer, Stevie J. The rapper and R&B singer's names have been redacted, but a footnote about the rapper said he's a Philadelphia rapper who dated Nicki Minaj.
And another one about the R&B singer said he performed at the Super Bowl and had a successful Vegas residency. It didn't take long for fans on the internet to figure out Meek Mill and Usher were the most likely suspects based on the description and their connection to Diddy.
Usher has been pretty quiet about it, but Meek Mill quickly denied it by going on a wild Twitter rant.
Lil Rod was also asking for $30 million. Things weren't looking good for Diddy, but at that point no one really knew if it was all true or people were just looking for a quick payday.
But a few months later, even more shocking evidence came out that proved at least some of the accusations were true. That's when CNN released the hotel surveillance video we mentioned earlier.
Up until that point, all the stories about Diddy were just accusations, and there was no direct evidence to prove he was guilty. No one knows exactly what's true and what isn't, but it's clear from the video that he was abusing Cassie, so it was enough evidence to convince more people that he's guilty.
A few days later, Diddy posted a video to social media where he addressed the situation saying, "I was drunk. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted when I did it. I'm disgusted now."
After that, more and more women started coming out with accusations and filing lawsuits against Diddy, including Dawn Richards, April Lampros, and Adria English.
For a while, it seemed like Diddy might even try to flee the country after police raided his homes in LA and Miami, and his private jet was spotted over the Caribbean.
This time, there was way too much evidence and public backlash for Diddy to sweep it under the rug, and the feds were already working on a case against him. On the 16th of September, 2024, Diddy was arrested by federal agents outside a hotel in New York.
The next day, the case files were unsealed and showed that Diddy was being charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and interstate transportation for prostitution.
Police are accusing Diddy of using his business empire to commit crimes and force people into sexual acts against their will. He was also denied bail because prosecutors claim he's a flight risk and has a history of intimidating witnesses, so he was sent to jail in Brooklyn to wait for trial and put on suicide watch.
The court documents also show that while police were searching Diddy's homes, they found over 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
The photos and jokes about baby oil quickly became a meme, and Diddy's lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, was asked about it in an interview. He said, "I don't think it was 1,000. I think it was a lot. There's a Costco right down the street. I think Americans buy in bulk, as we know. And this is consensual adults doing what consensual adults do."
The clip ended up going viral, and Costco even came out and said that they don't sell baby oil in bulk.
It turns out the truth about the baby oil might be even darker than people realized. There's rumors that it isn't even baby oil, and the bottles are actually filled with GHB, a drug that's meant to make you lose control of your muscles and pass out.
So that might have been what Diddy was using at his parties to drug people.
There are even rumors going around social media that Diddy has secret tunnels under his homes. One post claimed that Diddy's house in Los Angeles had an underwater tunnel that led all the way to the Playboy Mansion.
Other posts said that the tunnel is connected to a mansion that once belonged to Michael Jackson. Police haven't confirmed the rumors, and some sources claim it's fake, but this story is already so crazy it's hard to know what's real and what's fake.
Since Diddy's been locked up, more and more wild allegations about him have been coming out. In October 2024, a lawyer named Tony Busby claimed that he was representing 120 different people with all credible accusations about Diddy.
Tony started a hotline where people could call in and tell their story. He says they got over 3,200 calls, but after fact-checking the claims, they narrowed it down to about 120 cases they intended to file.
In one of the complaints, Diddy's even accused of drugging and assaulting a 9-year-old boy who was auditioning for a role at Bad Boy.
In another lawsuit, Diddy is accused of drugging and assaulting a 13-year-old girl, along with other unnamed celebrities.
People have been making jokes about Diddy and his wild parties for years, so it seems like his actions were an open secret in the industry. But now that all the details are starting to come out, it's making everyone question what people really knew and who was involved.
Some people even think that Justin Bieber might have been one of Diddy's victims. Justin Bieber first met Diddy through Usher when he was only 15 and was still pretty new to the industry.
Even though Diddy was almost 40 years old, they started spending a lot of time together. In an old interview on Jimmy Kimmel, Diddy admits that he met Justin in a strange way but realized he was one of the most talented people he ever met.
Justin starts talking about how Diddy gave him a Lamborghini, but Diddy cuts him off and said that Justin knows better than to talk about the things he does with Big Brother Puff on national television.
Around that time, Justin also uploaded a video to YouTube called Justin Bieber, 48 Hours with Diddy. In the video, Diddy jokes that he had custody over Justin and says that he can't disclose what they were doing, but it was every 15-year-old's dream.
If that wasn't sketchy enough, a clip from a few years later showed Justin looking pretty nervous around Diddy while they're in the studio together. Diddy starts pressing Justin about why they don't hang out as much anymore.
Justin starts stuttering and admits that Diddy was trying to get in touch with him through his management, but he tries to play it off like it was because Diddy didn't have his personal number. Justin looks really uncomfortable and clearly doesn't want to be around Diddy.
Now, looking back on it, a lot of people think it's because he was one of Diddy's victims early in his career. Justin hasn't said anything publicly about the accusations and resurfaced clips, but a source close to him said that he's shocked and disturbed by the recent news.
No one really knows how deep the conspiracy goes or how many other celebrities and people in the industry knew about Diddy's crimes. But it looks like his past finally caught up with him, and there's way too much evidence and legitimate accusations for him to sweep it under the rug this time.
It may take a while for the full truth to come out in court, but whatever happened, his reputation has been ruined, and he might end up spending the rest of his life behind bars.
So that's the complete story of Sean Diddy Combs, from his childhood in Harlem after his father's murder to his current situation facing life in prison.
It's really a tragic story when you think about it. This guy came from nothing, built this massive empire, and then allegedly used that power and influence to victimize and abuse people for decades.
And what's most disturbing is how long he got away with it. The allegations go back to the early 90s, but it took until 2023 for Cassie to finally come forward with her lawsuit, and even then, it was settled in 24 hours for $20 million.
If that hotel video hadn't leaked, who knows if we'd even be having this conversation right now? It really makes you wonder how many other powerful people in the entertainment industry are getting away with similar behavior.
The trial is ongoing, and we'll continue to bring you updates as they happen. But one thing's for sure, regardless of the verdict, Diddy's legacy is forever tarnished, and the music industry will never be the same.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our future coverage of this case and other major stories in the entertainment world.
And let us know in the comments what you think about all these allegations against Diddy. Do you believe them? Are you surprised? We'd love to hear your thoughts.